Hi you guys, welcome to the video. I'm John Villegas-Grubbs, and today's video is Kitninny, Catness, New Dog in the Neighborhood, Chapter 1, Part 1, for Christy, my favorite critter of all. Chapter 1, Magdalene Estates. Kitninny lived a very good life. He was a fine cat, with nice full tannish brown fur that he kept perfectly preened. He could be considered large, I suppose, and was the very joy of the family that he lived with. He couldn't quite remember requiring the family, or perhaps inheriting them. He was very young when it happened. But they were very good folks, kept him well fed and cared for. As a matter of fact, Kitninny had concluded that he would not trade them for anything. He was also very important as far as the other neighborhood cats were concerned. He just seemed to understand everything. He was what you might call the go-to cat. When something didn't make sense or there was a disagreement among the cats, Kitninny was the one that would usually end up resolving it. He was the cat with answers. He lived in an area where people were beginning to live, where no people had ever lived before. New big houses were springing up like mushrooms at the very edge of a big and very deep forest. New streets were being paved with concrete, it seemed like every day. New boards were being delivered, and men would appear and hammer them into houses. And sooner or later, a new cat would move in with their family of folks. It was what folks called development. And all kinds of areas close to the woods were becoming development. Some families moved in even though there was no cat with them, which Kitninny and the other cats thought very odd. Perfectly good families, with perfectly good people, and no cat. It really didn't make any sense. It is important that I explain a little bit about cats and people. Every good cat has people. Cats without people were generally considered rogue or renegades, often violent-tempered, mean street-type cats with no intention to be responsible or to be a contribution to society. Usually cats without people were cats without anything at all. Oh, some of them were the poets and the artists of the cat world, sometimes called bohemians, but they were the exception. Now, there were times when a cat may be down on his luck a little and be without any what people call assets. But a good cat who is disciplined and focused will always be able to acquire people as long as he put his mind to it. But the relationship was fraught with complications. There was much that cats simply did not understand about people. Cats generally consider them low-maintenance possessions, but they certainly had silly habits. For instance, cats could never understand why people talk so much. It was always a source of absolute amazement to them. Kit once remarked that they like to hear themselves talk so much that they have invented devices that route the sound of their voice back up to their ears so they can hear themselves talk, even though no one else was around. Here's one of Becky's drawings. I'll put it at the end of the video. This seemed simply absurd to most cats, but they just had to accept it, live with it, and move on. The cats knew that people referred to themselves as people, so they were familiar with the name, but that's not what cats generally called them. The cats had also heard that people referred to the area in which everyone lived as the neighborhood, but they had no idea what that meant either. The cats had figured out the meanings of most of the words, but many were still mysteries to them. Like I said earlier, it was a new group of houses sort of marching into the area of woods. Miles of woods, maybe millions of miles of woods. Kitninny didn't really know. They were endless. With his perfect eyesight, he could see the way, way deep into them, to the point where the green at the bottom met the green at the top. And it was all just woods. Forever and ever. But the neighborhood cats rarely, if ever, ventured into the woods any deeper than where they could still see their houses. There was a boundary somewhere in the woods beyond which you were no longer near the neighborhood, but where there was maybe a little too much mystery. You were a little too deep, and it could be scary. Getting too close to the boundary wasn't considered wise. Sometimes when a cat would disappear, the other cats would speculate maybe they went too deep into the woods. What became of them? During those long, lazy afternoons, the subject of what's in the woods would almost invariably come up. But it was always pure speculation. No one knew. Some cats thought it was where the people came from originally. Other cats had conjured up the most horrible monsters in their imagination. Kit figured that there was nothing in the woods at all. It was all just waiting for development, whatever that is. He argued that if there were monsters in there, what would keep them from coming out? Why weren't there any in the area of development, in the neighborhood? And wouldn't they be a little bit upset about the development anyway? Nope, Kit was sure there were no monsters. He didn't go beyond the safety boundary just the same. But you know, every once in a while a strange little animal from the woods would show up in the garbage cans. These animals were completely foreign to the cats, and the cats considered them the essence of evil. They were about the same size as the cats and white, but usually dirty and stinky. They had pointed pink noses. Cats called them the forest freaks, and they would sometimes have to gang up on them to run them back into the woods. There was also little animals that the people called mice that came from the woods. The cats really liked them and would often catch them for various reasons and purposes. Now the cats of the neighborhood had their own special routine early in the morning. As the sun was coming up, they would stroll out onto the newly paved roads and just plop themselves down. They might be across driveways from each other and would simply twitch their tail as they lie on their sides, looking up over their shoulders, sort of like to say, "Hey Patches, how's things? Coastin', Kit, no complaints. You? No complaints." Then drop heads back down to the pavement with a nice stretch and yawn like life was just a big bore. Nothing but sections between naps. And who could complain about that? On nights when the moon was full and there was a lot of light, they would meet in the frames of the unfinished houses to discuss the business of running the world. Their favorite place to meet was right across the street from where Kit lived, a big 2-story under construction. Kitninny was undisputed as the elder and generally kept his distance in these meetings. It would be undignified for him to always do the talking. Much better to let the other cats argue or rattle on, and then to sort of step in with the answer. That was the way Kit was. Like for instance, there was a dispute over the fate of a mouse that was originally spotted by Sloopy, who many would say actually made the first critical contact. But the chase was picked up by Moses, and everyone knows him to be the smartest, most stealth, and clever cat. Most handsome too. Kitninny presided. The argument proceeded that Moses would never have caught that mouse had Sloopy not made the first contact. Moses, on the other hand, argued that the contact between Sloopy and the mouse was incidental and had nothing to do with the catch. What was to be decided was the question of which cat was going to get the mouse in order to give it to its people. All cats understand the importance of providing for their people. It was obvious that the people didn't eat what cats eat, so cats were constantly trying to figure out different things on them, sort of out of a sense of responsibility. That the people didn't immediately eat the provisions of these responsible cats when they were first delivered was one of the many puzzlements of people. The cats could not figure out how to feed them. There was one great running debate about how to feed people, and even if it was necessary, many of the cats were solidly of the opinion that people feed themselves. They had a lot of evidence, many times viewing people eating things while seated at a table. More often than not, however, as some cats pointed out, what they had on that table was not food. It wasn't edible, so how could they be eating it? But many cats had made studied observations of their people seated at the tables, and clearly they were eating. It remains one of the great mysteries of people. Kit decided that the mouse would be presented first to Moses' people, and if they didn't want it, it would be given to Sloopy to provide for his. We're going to stop there on chapter 1, and I hope you join me back here for part 2. Thanks.